This here story is about 26-year-old Elle Edwards. On Christmas Eve 2022, she was celebrating with her friends in a pub in Ali Village, Liverpool, UK. The girl was real vibrant and beautiful. She worked as a cosmetologist in a local beauty salon and was also an assistant to a dermatologist. Elle was naturally positive and mighty kind, which allowed her to win over even the most demanding clients. Elle was purdy and had become an excellent specialist in her fields. The gal was cheerful and always smiling, but at the same time, she remained determined, constantly moving towards her goals and dreams. On December 22, her sister Lucy flew in from Dubai to spend the holidays with the family, and Elle eagerly awaited her return. They decided to celebrate this long-awaited event in style, so the girls and their friends headed to the local pub. Here they had a great time, laughing a lot, dancing and singing karaoke. In the merry atmosphere, no one noticed that a person to whom kindness was alien was nearby. Around 11:50 p.m., an emergency call came in. As they were exhaling the pub, no less than 12 shots were fired, and 2 of them hit Elle. She suffered a gunshot wound to the head that proved to be mighty serious. The dispatcher directed emergency services to the same. They urgent-like arrived at the pub, loaded the girl into an ambulance, and took her to the local hospital. However, she died on the way as her injuries was incompatible with life. When the police informed the victim's family about the tragedy, they was in a state of shock. No one believed it, and no one understood how this could have happened to Elle. No one suspected that this beautiful and cheerful girl could have had deadly enemies. In the early stages of the investigation, the detectives had no leads. The assailant had attacked unexpected-like and disappeared gestures mysteriously, leaving only a shell cast-in and the bleeding victim at the crime scene. The attack was sudden but well-planned and gave Elle no chance of survival. But was the gal the true target of the attack? Or did she become a random victim of a madman? An unknown car stopped near the pub entrance, and minutes later, the shooting started. In addition to the deceased, 4 other men received gunshot wounds of varying severity, all of them young people aged 22 to 33 who spent in the evening in the establishment and lived in the nearby towns. Initially, the police were inclined to believe that the murdered woman was a random victim. It was known that criminal gangs were operating in the area periodically. The shooting was likely the routine showdown between their members. However, all of this was just conjecture, which would have to be proven or disproved in the course of the investigation. So the detectives delved deeper into the victim's personality, like the witnesses to the crime. The victim's relatives were at a loss as to who could have wanted Elle's death, as the girl seemed to have no ill wishes or enemies capable of such horrors. The detectives decided to interview other witnesses and the victims of the unknown criminal's gunfire. In addition, law enforcement officers requested the pub owner's video surveillance recordings. It would be necessary to talk to dozens of people and analyze several hours of video recordings. Several police officers were working on the extensive investigation. It was necessary to answer several difficult questions. There were too many victims of the attack, but was this spontaneous aggression, or did the perpetrator pursue a specific target? All witnesses to the incident were interrogated. However, checking mobile communications data took more time. The media were notified to assist in the investigation. Law enforcement officers urged anyone with valuable information to come to the police station. First and foremost, this concerned possible video recordings made by random eyewitnesses on any of which the car in which the aggressor arrived might appear. After the crime, the police held a meeting with local residents. The purpose of this communication was to persuade people possessing valuable information to share it with law enforcement officers. It was assumed that someone might have seen the moment of the attack or know the criminal. People were urged not to be afraid of the criminals and the local feuding clans. Community leaders supported local residents during this difficult time. In addition to the conversations, activists went door to door and communicated with the neighbors. Special trained officers worked with the family of the deceased, their goal being to provide them with support in connection with the heavy loss. In the course of this work, it was established that the perpetrator had left the pub parking lot in a dark-colored car. Eyewitness accounts regarding it may differed. It was dark and it was difficult to make out anything, but the most likely was a dark Mercedes A-Class. Later, this was confirmed after checking the outdoor surveillance cameras. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe to our new channel, where we uncover captivating and chilling cold cases that will keep you on the edge of your seat. You won't want to miss the twists and turns we have in store. Let's continue. The killer did not immediately open fire, but drove up to the parking lot and observed the pub visitors for some time. He sat in the car so that he could freely see the entrance and most of what was happening inside. Apparently, he was choosing the most convenient moment for the attack. After a few minutes of surveillance, when Elle came out, the criminal quickly got out of the car, fired 12 shots, then instantly got back behind the wheel and disappeared. Investigators, after studying the recordings, made an important conclusion. The attacker was a liar. No one helped him. It was not possible to trace the exact location where the perpetrator fled. Therefore, the detectives went door to all local residents, describing the car and recounting the circumstances of the incident, trying to establish the identity of the killer. Patrolling the streets was carried out around the clock, and this yielded results. Just 2 days after the shooting, detectives detained 2 suspects, but no names were mentioned until all the circumstances were clarified. However, it was not possible to prove their involvement in the crime, in particular because the murder weapon was not found. After that, the detectives made a statement to the public saying that they would not rest until the unknown shooter was punished. All this was intended to calm the local residents who were outraged by the rampant crime and the powerlessness of the authorities. It was also assumed that the attack had been provoked by a feud between local gangs. In this case, Elle would be considered a random victim. However, all this was also just an assumption that remained to be verified. In the course of the investigation, it was possible to establish that the potential targets could have been Jake Dackley and Kyram Salt, members of the local Beechwood gang, who was spending the evening in the pub. It became known that they had been in long-term fierce conflict with another group claiming this territory. On December 29th, the police arrested another person, but he was not the one who opened fire. The suspect had a solid alibi that excluded him from the list of suspects. However, the detective suspected that he had participated in the setup for the attack. Around the same time, the dark Mercedes car in which the killer had left the pub parking lot was identified. But due to the lack of direct evidence, the name of the third suspect was also not disclosed. There were some difficulties with the found car. The car was traced through video surveillance systems and identified thanks to the cameras, but law enforcement officers were too late. On December 31st, the police department received the report that the fire had started near the scene of the shooting. When the special services arrived at the scene, they found a darkness fatty similar to the perpetrator's vehicle, which was engulfed in flames. The vehicle was completely burned out. Valuable evidence was lost in the flames. The perpetrators clearly knew that the police were on their trail, so they decided to destroy one of the direct pieces of evidence. Despite the fact that the fire did not completely destroy the car, it was confirmed that it had been used during the shooting. However, the Mercedes did not belong to the perpetrators, but had been stolen shortly before the attack. Presumably, the arson was committed intentionally to complicate the investigation after the murder of competitors. On January 11th, 2 more suspects, a 22-year-old man and a 23-year-old woman, were delivered to the police department. They were arrested in Central Wales. The man's name was Connor Chapman. He was well known to the police. He had an extensive criminal record that he had accumulated over the past 5 years before the murder of Elle Edwards. Connor had started with daring law breakings and gradually sank deeper into the abyss of crime. One of his first serious crimes was a car theft under aggravating circumstances. He had repeatedly become a suspect in robberies, hooliganism, and threatening behavior. Once the young man was involved in a chase with the police, after which he abandoned the car and hid in the bushes nearby. When they detained him, the criminal said that he did not understand what chase they were talking about and that he was here just waiting for a friend. In this case, he became the real star. The detainee's data ended up in newspaper headlines. Carla Chapman was from Birkenhead, Liverpool. His parents had left him at an early age, so his grandparents had formalized guardianship. It was in their house that the hero of the story moved. The teenager dropped out of high school shortly before the exams. In general, he studied poorly, and no special hopes were pinned on him. He was always considered a problem child. The young hooligan first became a defendant in a court case in 2014 when he was 14 years old. Connor was accused of shoplifting. As early as 2016, he committed another crime. His involvement in the theft of a car was proven when the young man was detained in a stolen vehicle. He did not have a driver's license or insurance, which was a violation of the terms of his suspended sentence. In 2017, high theft was added to the storage of prohibited substances. During this period, he was also under police supervision, so he had again violated the restraining order. As a result, he was banned from accessing several parts of the city. Connor was not allowed to appear in public places as he clearly posed a threat to society. However, as early as 2019, he violated the ban again. The patrols detained him in a public place. The young man had a knife and prohibited substances with him. In the same year, the general public first heard about Connor Chaplin. He appeared on the pages of the local newspaper after an unsuccessful attempt to escape from the police in a stolen car. The city patrol noticed a stolen Audi on the street and ordered the driver to stop and get out of the car with his hands up. However, the 18-year-old Chapman did not obey, provoking a chase. During the short flight, Connor committed a large number of traffic violations. In particular, he accelerated to more than 80 kilometers per hour in areas with a 30-kilometer limit. Tanner repeatedly drove into oncoming traffic and in the end crashed into the curb. At speed, the car was thromboside and turned around. The driver could not continue the orgy, so he got out of the car and ran away. However, even here, he was unlucky as the patrol caught up with him in the bushes just a few hundred meters away. In his defense, the young man said that he was waiting here for a friend, but the deception was obvious. The lawyer of Connor explained in court that his client had fallen under the influence of a bad company of old phrase. The court left him unpunished and the need to release the budding criminal. It was found that had attention deficit disorder and a number of other disorders identified by private specials during the trial. Despite this, due to numerous violations and potentially dangerous behavior on the road, he was sentenced to a term of up to 8 months in prison for 2 manners. The young man also received a ban on driving a car, which was in effect after his release. Thus, the budding criminal had achieved 14 convictions for 30 criminal episodes by the time he reached adulthood. It was obvious that he had no intention of changing and categorically refused to fit into society. Everyone understood that he was potentially dangerous, but legal grounds for isolating him from society had not been found. This was due to the fact that so far no person had been seriously injured by his inadequate behavior. The public was outraged by the powerlessness of the authorities. Everything was shaping up so that the criminal elements could do nothing until they kill or maim innocent people, and that's how it turned out. In January 2020, the court again sentenced Connor Chapman, this time to 10 months in prison. He was again caught in a public place with a cold weapon and substances in his pocket, a whole bouquet of prohibitive lists. During this period, the police openly appeared on TV channels, urging the public to beware of this young man. After serving his sentence protected months, he again got involved in crime and was wanted for at least 5 criminal episodes. When he was caught, the young criminal said that he had spent more time behind bars than free, and he did not seem upset about this, but rather proud of his achievements. However, Connor had no intention of stopping there. By the age of 20, his service record had expanded again. By this point, he had received 19 sentences for 43 crimes. But in the summer of 2022, the inadequate young man found himself free again. This happened just 6 months before the death of Elle Edwards. During this period, Connor was again brought before the court. His lawyer tried to play on pity, telling the story that the first child of the young man was born while he was in prison. At this point, his girlfriend was pregnant with a girl. The young man claimed that he had rethought his life and wanted to get on the path of correction. Of course, these were loud, false words. The only thing he wanted was to get free and return to the path of crime. During this period, The police already knew that he was a member of one of the local criminal gangs engaged in the sale of prohibited substances. However, the criminal was tried not for these serious crimes, but for burglary and theft of 2 electric motorcycles. On December 22, a skirmish broke out between 2 rival criminal gangs. They began to argue over the division of the territory near the wooden church in Beechwood Estates. They failed to reach an agreement, after which the young gangster decided to take revenge. He armed himself with a submachine gun and waited for about 3 hours until he tracked down his targets. He wanted to kill Curran Seld and Jake Duffy, who had gone to the Moyak pub for rest. Shortly before midnight, the criminal drove up to the parking lot and began to observe. He identified his victims and waited for the right moment to attack, then ran out of a car and fired 12 bullets into the building. He managed to seriously injure Duffy, but despite the threat to his life, he survived the attack. However, the unlucky Elle Edwards was not so fortunate. 2 bullets hit her in the head. The young beauty fought for her life, but died in the arms of the medics on the way to the hospital. The girl accidentally met the killer's targets that evening and did not even suspect that the festive revelry could end so tragically. The pub was crowded. Then 1 person was killed and 4 were wounded. One 22-year-old man was shot in the leg, a 24-year-old young man was wounded in the arm, and a 33-year-old man in the wrist. None of these injuries were life-threatening. Elle's friends tried to provide her with assistance and perform artificial respiration right on the spot. However, this was not enough to save her life. Elle's sister Lucy was much like Diameter. She lived in Dubai and flew home to celebrate Christmas with her family. Just minutes before the attack, she had left the establishment, so she was not affected at all. Later, Lucy recalled how she had wanted to take her sister with her, but the girl wanted to stay with her friends. On January 25, 2023, the funeral of the young girl took place. Hundreds of concerned people came to say goodbye to the random victim of gang showdowns. The body was brought to the local church in a hearse drawn by 4 white horses. Even the pub that had become the site of the girl's last celebration was closed that day as a mark of respect for her memory. The owner of the establishment published a message of support for Elle's family on his official social media page. Connor Chapman was charged with a whole list of charges, the main one of which was murder. It became known that the Perth had an accomplice, namely the 20-year-old Thomas. After the arrest and during the searches, a video recording was found on this young man, which had been made shortly before the attack. In it, Connor is handing over a weapon and saying that he is going to settle accounts with someone. After the attack, they together hid the stolen Mercedes in order to get rid of it later. The murder weapon was never found. However, the killer's DNA traces were found on one of the shell casings fired. It was obvious that it was Connor who loaded the weapon before the attack. In addition, red gloves were found during searches in his house, which were clearly visible in the CCTV footage from morning. After the crime, when the perpetrators had abandoned the car, they ordered a taxi under a false name. They used the driver's services to cover their tracks and confused the investigation. Around 5 a.m., they returned to the place where the hidden car was located. Here, the criminals tried to cover their tracks. However, something went wrong. Ultimately, they decided to get rid of the car by setting it on fire. Thomas Nord was found guilty on all charges brought against him. In July 2023, the court sentenced him to 9 years in prison. This modest sentence was due to the fact that he had not yet managed to accumulate such a wide criminal history as his accomplice. Jake and Karen were wounded in the moment of the attack, but both managed to survive the assault. A look at their lifestyle made the aggression of one of the members of the rival gangs quite understandable. Both were members of the local Beechwood gang, which was openly in conflict with another group claiming this territory. It became known that on December 23, 2023, just a day before the attack with firearms, they had already been attacked. On that occasion, another person from Connor Chapman's group had assaulted them. Both were beaten, but did not receive serious injuries. Apparently, they considered this a random fight and calmly went to relax in the pub. While the shooter awaited his sentence in the case of the murder of the innocent victim, both targets of his attack were already in prison. Curran was sentenced to 27 months in prison for an attack on members of the rival criminal group. Another 9 months were added to the sentence for the fight. His friend was sentenced to 2 years and 9 months for a similar offense. Obviously, they were trying to avenge the attempted murder. Prohibitive court orders were also issued against both of them with a whole list of restrictions. Of course, this method did not allow protecting citizens from this gang of criminals. However, in case of further violations, more severe punishment could be applied to them due to ignoring the prescriptions. The public was outraged that potentially dangerous members of criminal gangs were getting away with minimum sentences after each crime. The bans were clearly ineffective and did not contribute absolutely anything to public safety. This became especially obvious when it was found that Chapman already had a ban on visiting that region where the pub was located. But this did not prevent him from stealing a car and coming to the public place despite the fact that he also had a driving ban. The events that had occurred once again raised the question of toughening punishments and revising the existing norms of the legal system. However, so far this flawed system has not suffered any serious changes. At the trial on the case of Elle's murder, Connor tried to refute that it was he who appeared on the CCTV footage. According to him, during this period he was at home packing Christmas gifts. However, a sufficient amount of evidence was collected to expose the lie. The hearings on the case lasted 3.5 weeks, during which all the circumstances preceding the attack were revealed. It became known that the reason for the attack was only the competition between the two criminal gangs dividing the territory nearby. The defendant did not even know the victim. He simply did not care about her fate, as well as the fate of all the other innocent people in the bar. He was driven only by blind fury, which he could never control. After the attempted murder of 2 competitors, Connor planned to flee to Spain to cover his tracks. He used a stolen car and also got rid of the murder weapon. Trying not to fall into the hands of the police, he avoided using any murder transport. The detectives detained the criminal literally at the airport. After the arrest, Connor tried to deceive the police, planning that the Mercedes he was seen driving on the day of the murder was not stolen. According to him, this was a common car of the criminal group, which they used for the distribution of substances. The guy claimed that he was not behind the wheel of the vehicle and also continued to convince the jury that he did not open fire that evening. He was desperately trying to get out of the situation. The defendant stated that he had only just learned that someone from the criminal group had used the vehicle for an attack on the pub. Before the jury retired to consider the verdict, the father of the innocent victim made a short speech. He sincerely hoped that the criminal would never again be able to spend Christmas with his loved ones in freedom. The jurors, consisting of Pityashin and Sanjinshin, came to a unanimous decision after 3 hours of discussion. In their opinion, Connor Chapman was guilty of all the charges brought against him. He cynically committed the crime and did not repent of the fact that he accidentally killed the beautiful 26-year-old girl. The whole life that lay ahead of her, and he took it away. Instead of remorse, the heartless Connor spent several days carefully getting rid of all the evidence and traces of the murder that could link him to this bloody event. The motive for the attack was the competition between criminal gangs. On July 7, 2023, Connor was sentenced. He was sent to serve a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 48 years from the start of serving the sentence. After the verdict was announced, the victim's father victoriously raised his fist. The incident provoked a wave of public outrage. The residents of the city could not feel safe, knowing that they were at the junction of the confrontation between criminal gangs dividing spheres of influence. They knew that these people had a large amount of firearms and were not afraid to use them, as proved by the murder of Elle. The girl's father said he wanted to set up a foundation to support victims like his daughter. He believed that the main goal would be to fight to reduce the number of weapons in the hands of civilians. The case of Lisa Cecilia Hardham, the fiancée of a tyrant who turned a luxury apartment into a prison. Controlling behavior in couple relationships, unfortunately, is not uncommon and quite dangerous. It manifests itself when a person tries to subjugate and forcibly adapt their other half to their own needs through intimidation, demonstrations of strength and power, as well as humiliation and total control. Often the victim, because of the instilled feelings of fear and guilt, does not realize that he or she is in a destructive situation. The story of a young woman named Lisa Cecilia Hardham illustrates what a relationship with a control freak can lead to. She naively believed that she had met the love of her life, but she herself did not notice how her fiancé became a monster who turned their luxurious apartment into a real prison with 24-hour video surveillance. This case provoked an international scandal and was widely covered in the press. The unfortunate Lisa tried to make Lisa look mentally unstable and cold-blooded crime to pass off as an accident or voluntary resignation from life. However, the perpetrator, despite his money and connections, did not manage to escape responsibility. Now let's understand how her beloved man turned into a monster who hid his inhuman attitude behind care. Lisa Cecilia Hardham. Biography, family, early years. Our today's heroine was born in Canada on June 12, 1981 in the suburbs of Toronto and was the second child in the family. Lisa was brought up together with her older brother Jason, with whom she has always been very close. They were raised independently by single mom Joanna. Brother and sister did not remember their father because he left the family when the children were very young and no longer took any part in their lives. Lisa Cecilia grew up as an active and purposeful girl. From an early age, she was involved in sports. Together with her brother went to the martial arts section, liked to play soccer and volleyball. But her main passion has always been ballet. She daily visited the dance studio where she practiced at the bar for several hours. The girl from childhood was tall and slender, but professional ballet classes required the strictest diet, which had a detrimental effect on the growing body. In adolescence, Lisa developed anorexia on the background of eating disorders. For a long time, she kept silent about her problem, believing that she could cope with everything herself. But when her weight approached critically low values, her mother sounded the alarm and put her daughter in the clinic where Lisa needed to spend several months to restore health and weight gain. After graduating from school, the girl continued dancing classes and also decided to connect her life with the beauty industry. In parallel with her university studies, she got a job as a perfumer in one of the stores of a large cosmetics chain. And in her spare time, she studied the subtleties of makeup and hairdressing, moving to Australia. In February 2005, having celebrated her 20th birthday, Lisa decided to make drastic changes in her life. She wanted to go to the other side of the world, to Australia, and there were several reasons for that. Firstly, she wanted to live in a warmer and milder climate. And secondly, Lisa wanted to see the world. She took a one-year work visa and traveled to another continent. However, with her then flew Joanna, who accompanied her daughter for the first few months to make sure that she was all right, and she settled well in the new place. The mother then returned back to Toronto with peace of mind, making sure her daughter could take care of herself. Lisa settled in Sydney, where she rented a cozy apartment and soon got a job at a local small cosmetology company. After her visa expired, she decided to move to Australia permanently. First, she extended her stay for another year and then began to prepare the necessary documents to obtain citizenship of this country. Personal life. As for personal life in this respect, everything was not easy. The fact is that Lisa always preferred to meet with older men. Obviously, not the least role in this played a lack of a father in the family, so she always reached out to more mature men looking for support and protection in them. In February 2006, Lisa successfully interviewed for a job at Sydney Cosmetics and was hired. She soon began in a romantic relationship with a coworker who was almost twice her age. A few months later, they decided to start living together, and Lisa moved into the apartment of her lover. And after a couple more months, the girl introduced her boyfriend to her mom and brother, and they approved her choice. The couple traveled a lot around the world, rested in the Seychelles in Paris, and also visited the famous carnival in Rio de Janeiro. The man even made Lisa a marriage proposal, which she gladly accepted. But about a year after the engagement, the lovers broke up. Lisa did not go into detail about the reasons for this decision, but hinted that too great a difference in age, however, played in this not the least role. In 2010, Lisa graduated from the Sydney College of Stylists and got a job as a hairdresser in a popular beauty salon, where she quickly won the respect of colleagues and the trust of customers. At the same time, a new boyfriend appeared in her life, but their romance did not last long because Lisa found out that he was married. Destroy someone else's family she was not going to, so she quickly broke off the relationship. But shortly before that, at one of the parties, this guy introduced her friend, a businessman named Simon Gittany. This acquaintance turned out to be fatal for Lisa. Who is Simon Gittany? Simon was born in Maryland in December 1973 in a very religious large family of immigrants from Lebanon. He had 5 other siblings, whom his parents raised in strictness and obedience. However, Simon from a young age had problems with controlling emotions and outbursts of anger, and he was also possessive, did not tolerate rejection, and often gave the will of his fists. All this eventually led to serious problems with the law. The first time Gittany was behind bars was at the age of 18 when he came to his ex-girlfriend in the store where she worked and began to openly molest her. The store owner interceded for the girl and threw the impudent man out the door, but Simon returned with friends who grabbed the store owner and held him, while Simon beat him severely. That time, the guy only served a few months and was released on bail for good behavior afterwards. But 3 years later, he was arrested again, this time on theft charges. However, Simon resisted violently, threw himself into a fight, and bit off one of the policeman's earlobe. He was threatened with a serious prison sentence for this prank, but the pastor of the Lebanese Christian church, of which his entire family was members, interceded. As a result, the young man spent only a year and a half in prison. In February, Simon again came to the attention of the police, and this time he was arrested for possession and distribution of illegal substances. But the sentence was again extremely lenient, and he served 2 years out of the 4 assigned to him. On release, Gittany, as it seemed to everyone, took the path of correction. He moved to Sydney, where with a few friends founded a fairly successful business for the production and sale of luxury women's shoes. This business brought a stable high income, so Simon quickly became rich, acquired luxury real estate in a prestigious neighborhood, a premium class car, and carefully tried to hide from everyone his rich criminal past, from his roommates to his lovers. At that party, Simon and Lisa exchanged phone numbers, and soon he called her himself. Their relaxed communication somehow imperceptibly grew into a buddy relationship. And when in January 2010, Lisa complained that she was unhappy with her current living conditions and would like to rent an apartment in another neighborhood, Gittany kindly offered her to live for free in one of the rooms of his luxurious apartment while she was looking for a suitable place to rent. Lisa accepted the offer, although her mother was somewhat alarmed by this turn of events. But Lisa convinced Joanna that it was a temporary measure and that she and Simon are just friends. By the way, she herself at that time thought that the man who so carefully monitors his appearance and adores piercings prefer to build relationships with guys. But this opinion turned out to be wrong. For the first couple of months, Gittany really kept his distance. The young people lived in separate rooms, and there was not even a hint of intimacy or romance between them. But gradually, they got closer, the so-called spark, and started a romance, which quickly gained momentum. At the time of the beginning of their relationship, Simon was 37 years old, and Lisa 28. Simon seemed to her a beautiful prince from a fairy tale. He was sociable, cheerful, spoiled his beloved with gifts, and arranged her pleasant surprises. The couple began to appear everywhere together. In particular, they went together to an elite sports club, which Simon attended regularly for many years. Lisa was sure that finally met her true love and will live a long, happy life with the chosen one. She raved about him to her mother, brother, and friends, and had no idea that this fairy tale would soon end. An affectionate tyrant. Just 6 months after the beginning of the relationship, Simon's behavior began to change, but it happened in stages and in such a way that Lisa did not notice anything, thinking that the lover in June 2010, shortly after Lisa celebrated her 20th birthday, Simon began to persistently persuade her to quit her job, claiming that she was not valued there and she could find a better paid position. But Lisa loved working at the beauty salon, where she had many regular clients and was happy with her income, so she didn't understand why she should quit her job and refuse to do so. Simon was not satisfied with the refusal, and in August of the same year, he showed up at Lisa's salon, having thrown a loud scandal, which actually forced her to write a letter of resignation. Lisa Hardham was shocked by his behavior, but Gittany assured that it would be better. And in general, she can no longer work because his income will allow them both to live comfortably, nothing to deny themselves. A month and a half later, the couple moved into a new luxury apartment located on the 15th floor of an elite residential complex. As it later turned out, the room was literally stuffed with hidden surveillance cameras, of which Lisa, of course, did not even guess. Simon gave his beloved an expensive smartphone and laptop, pre-installed on them spyware that allowed him to track all her messages, emails, as well as listen to calls and see all of Lisa's movements. In addition, Simon gained access to her social media accounts and began to discreetly clean lists of friends, delete posts and photos at his discretion, as well as read personal correspondence. Total control. Gittany's control over Lisa increased day by day, but as an experienced manipulator, he made it look as if his girlfriend wanted to do as he told her. Gittany had invaded literally every aspect of her life, leaving no hint of privacy. He forbade Lisa to use cosmetics, claiming that she does too bright makeup, which makes her look vulgar. He also bought her clothes and unsightly clothes in gray and black colors, and all her outfits simply threw away, arguing that they were too revealing and men would stare at her. From the apartment, Lisa went out only accompanied by her lover. They visited together only those places that he himself chose. Simon even forbade her to visit the gym. Instead, he bought several expensive exercise machines, saying that now she could train at home. Lisa's social media friend lists were dwindling by the day, and eventually, Gittany convinced her to delete the accounts. Lisa also had no friends left in real life, and all her contacts and calls were closely monitored. Simon only allowed her to communicate with her mother and brother. Last trip home. In December 2010, Lisa decided to fly to Canada to celebrate Christmas with her family. Simon was going to fly with her, but at the last moment his plans were disrupted because of urgent business matters. He didn't plan to let his friend go alone, but she literally begged him, because she hadn't seen her mom and brother for over a year. In the end, he agreed but set strict conditions and rules which she had to strictly follow. Jason and Joanna were shocked at the changes that had happened to Lisa over the past year. She was nothing like the bright and cheerful ponytail and hidden under a headdress. Her clothes were baggy, unattractive, and completely black. But it wasn't even the outward changes that were the most frightening. Lisa flinched every time the phone rang and instantly grabbed the receiver. It was one of Simon's conditions. She had to answer immediately at any time of day, no matter what she was doing at that moment. Lisa stayed at her mother's house all the time, refused to see her friends, and hardly ever went out. Joanna was alarmed and frightened by this behavior of her daughter, and she decided to have a heart-to-heart talk with her. Then Lisa burst into tears, admitted that Simon always knows where she is, with whom she communicates, and what she talks about on the phone. Lisa also revealed that Simon doesn't allow her to work, see her friends, go to the gym, or have any hobbies. In fact, she had no friends left at all. Her mother was shocked. She began to persuade her daughter to stay in Canada because in Australia, she has nothing to keep her. But Lisa said that she loved Simon and did not want to break off the relationship with him. Lisa was sure that this is just a transitional period in their relationship because they have been together for less than a year, and soon he will calm down and loosen his grip. She also added that her lover cares about her and wishes her only good. Despite pleas from her family to stay and attempts to convince Lisa that the relationship was unhealthy, she decided to move back to Australia to stay with Gittany. Lisa reassured her mother, saying that there was nothing to worry about and that Simon loved her and would not hurt her. Prisoner. After Lisa returned, the situation only got worse. Simon forbade her to leave the apartment, and if they went out together, she had to look only at her feet so as not to meet the eyes of other men. Moreover, Simon began to call Lisa by her second name, Cecilia, because it seemed more decent to him. In the spring of 2011, Lisa began to complain of pain in her leg. It was an old injury received in his youth during ballet classes. But instead of taking her to the hospital, Gittany hired a female physical therapist who came to their home 3 times a week to give her massages. She soon became Lisa's only friend and confidant, to whom Lisa spoke candidly about the difficult situation she found herself in. On June 12th, for Lisa's 30th birthday, Simon decided to throw a party at the most expensive restaurant in Sydney, but among the guests were only Simon's relatives and people from his inner circle. Lisa, on her own birthday, boyfriend did not allow to invite anyone. At the end of the evening, Simon proposed to Lisa by putting a ring on her finger. Harroun responded with consent and then cried. But all present noticed that these were not tears of joy, but rather tears of despair and hopelessness. Back home, Lisa called her mother and informed her of her engagement, sobbing into the phone. But Joanna was not at all happy about it. She began to persuade her daughter to leave this man and, as soon as possible, to return home to Canada. In response, Lisa only asked her mother never to start such conversations on the phone. At that moment, she already realized that the fiancé was listening to the calls, although she did not know for sure. Escape plan. For a while, Lisa tried to distract herself with thoughts of the upcoming wedding and began planning the festivities. When she decided to consult with Simon about something related to the event, he rudely cut her off and told her that he would choose the place, by her address, and make the guest list. Lisa was utterly crushed, for she had no say even here. During another visit to the physiotherapist, Lisa admitted that she couldn't go on like this, but she couldn't leave because her fiancé wouldn't let her go. Together, they developed a plan according to which Lisa, at each visit of the masseuse, gave her some of her belongings for safekeeping, but did everything so that Simon did not notice anything. On July 28th, Simon left his laptop at home in a hurry, which he usually carried with him everywhere. Lisa took advantage of this and looked into it, and her worst fears were realized. There, she found a spyware program with the help of which the fiancé received all the data from her phone, as well as numerous recordings of her conversations with her mother. But the most horrifying discovery was the surveillance footage from the security cameras located in every room of their apartment. That same day, Lisa, using her physical therapist's phone, called her mother and asked her to come on the next flight to her apartment and take her home. However, Joanna could not leave work so quickly. She needed time to ask for an excuse to switch shifts with one of her colleagues. Afterwards, the woman could never forgive herself for this delay. Back home, Simon immediately realized that his fiancée had taken his laptop and seen the spyware. Lisa cried, trying to figure out why she deserved to be treated that way. But Simon only pointed out that he'd done it for her own good. Accident or murder? The next day, July 29th, a serious conversation took place between the young people, the recording of which was later presented in court. Lisa was in tears and asked to go home, but Gittany calmly and confidently said that this would never happen, asked Lisa to calm down, and claimed that she had mental problems. On the morning of July 30th, 2011, Lisa got up early, got fully dressed, and put her documents and essentials in her purse. She locked herself in the bathroom and called her mother one last time, telling her that if anything happened to her, it would be Simon's fault. Apparently, Lisa wanted to leave the apartment unnoticed while her fiancé slept, but she failed. What happened next can only be guessed. According to neighbors, they heard a scream in the hallway, but did not have time to react because all abruptly hushed. And exactly a minute later, a young woman fell from the balcony of the 15th floor, crashing to her death. Several passers-by on the street also heard the scream and saw a body falling from a height, but did not have time to realize what was happening. According to a guy who was walking his dog that morning and was closest to the scene, he heard a noise and looked up. The eyewitness saw a man holding something large, which he then threw down. When passers-by came to the place of the fall, they saw a young woman lying on the ground, but all attempts to help her were in vain, as she died instantly, having received extensive injuries. 3 minutes later, Gittany, dressed in his pajamas, ran out into the street. He was crying, saying he didn't know how he was going to live his life, and claiming that he hadn't caught his fiancée in time. At first glance, it looked like an accident, but Simon himself was quick to claim that his fiancée had voluntarily passed away. A note in his pocket and a frightening video. Strange things began as soon as the body was taken to the morgue and examined. In different pockets were found fragments of a note torn into small pieces with the text, "There are cameras everywhere in the apartment." Probably, Lisa was afraid that Simon might find the message, so she turned the note into a kind of garbage and scattered it in different pockets. A check showed that there were indeed a lot of cameras in the apartment, but the hard disk with recordings could not be found, and Simon claimed that there was no video recording at all. A surveillance camera in the communal hallway, on the other hand, captured something frightening. The short clip shows Lisa running out of the apartment and calling for help, but her fiancé grabs her from behind, covers her mouth, and drags her back in. This happened a minute before she fell off the balcony, and it was this scream that the neighbors heard. And Gittany's laptop was found to contain a recording of a conversation he and Lisa had the night before the tragedy, as well as spyware that Simon used to spy on his fiancée. According to Simon, he and Lisa had an argument that morning, and she became hysterical. She ran out into the hallway screaming, but he brought her back because he didn't want to put on a show for the neighbors. In the apartment, he picked up the phone to call her mother, but Lisa ran out to the balcony at that moment and threw herself down, and he ran after her but did not catch her in time. He claimed that she had threatened to take her own life before, but he didn't take her words seriously. But Gittany attributed the spy program to his concern for his fiancée's safety. Trial and sentencing. In the course of the trial, Simon was accompanied by already a new pasta, 22-year-old model Rachel Louise, who was just incredibly similar to his dead fiancé. However, later it was said that the girl just wanted to become famous at the expense of this high-profile case and therefore willingly talked to the press and appeared on television, saying that Gittany would never raise his hand on a woman. Simon's lawyers tried to convince the court that Lisa suffered from a mental disorder, was prone to hysterics, and could have voluntarily passed away. Even a long history of anorexia and treatment in the clinic came up. The defense also argued that the defendant, being short in stature, simply could not physically lift Lisa, who was taller than him, and also could not throw her off the balcony. But this version was refuted by a trainer from the gym, which Simon had attended regularly for many years. According to the trainer, the defendant worked with heavy weights, was much stronger. Court was the physiotherapist to whom Lisa had told in detail everything that had happened to her and had given her her belongings in the hope of escaping from the tyrant. It was her testimony that was decisive. Gittany was found guilty of murdering his fiancée and sentenced to 26 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 years. After the verdict was announced, Rachel Louise threw a tantrum and began to insult the judge, for which she was removed from the room. All attempts by Simon and his lawyers to challenge the court's decision were rejected, and the verdict remained in force. Rachel soon dumped her boyfriend, saying in an interview that it was difficult for them to maintain a relationship in prison, but she remains convinced of his innocence. The case of Cassandra Cantrell. Cassandra and Robert were twins. As children, Cassandra and Robert liked to tell each other scary stories in a room with the lights off. Robert was a talented storyteller. Cassandra always found Robert's stories interesting. In every story, Robert played a small but brave man. In addition, Cassandra and Robert also watched the animated series Scooby-Doo together. Although their mother, Mary Smith, did not share Cassandra's passion to instill in her children a love of reading, she bought them many books about scary stories. Loving horror stories was the passion of the two siblings. They even collected figurines of villains and, as adults, seriously considered opening a horror-themed bookstore. Not long after, Cassandra's interest in horror movies brought her to the studio in February 2004. She got a cameo role in a scary movie that, although it did not become popular, still made Robert envious of Cassandra. Robert began asking Cassandra to make him a deal. Robert asked Cassandra to give him a role in the movie she was filming. Cassandra readily agreed. Robert was happy, but he couldn't play even a supporting role in a soap opera. The head of the cast in that movie was Colin Dudley, who had a crush on Cassandra since her first days in the movie. At the company Halloween party, Cassandra dressed as Velma from Scooby-Doo and Colin dressed as Alex from A Clockwork Orange. During the party, Colin walked around with a glass of milk all evening, glaring at everyone just like his character did in the movie, and he also said a lot of quotes from the book. Finally, he stopped in front of Cassandra and said that her beauty made Colin want to destroy it. Cassandra thought it was a compliment and they quickly started dating. But their relationship didn't last long, only a few months. Colin found another named Rebecca and began dating her, after which Colin and Rebecca began living together. One day on August 25, 2020, Cassandra Cantrell suddenly disappeared. When her mother, Mary Smith, tried to contact her, she did not answer the phone. Mary went to report the incident to the police, and a search was quickly launched. After several days of searching, police found her car under the bridge. Also, the bad news was that the car was unlocked and the keys were still inside. There was no reason for Cassandra to appear here. This place was considered a homeless shelter where violence often occurred. Officers had to go through the neighborhood questioning many homeless people. But none of them had ever seen Cassandra, and none of them knew when the car appeared here. The detective participating in the search for Cassandra requested to locate Cassandra's cell phone. The signal showed the phone was in the water closest to the bridge, which meant detectives wouldn't be able to recover it and couldn't get the information they needed. To search more closely, a team of divers was about to search the coastal area for Cassandra. Before starting, they stood on the shore, picked up rocks, and threw them into the water to gauge the distance they could throw. Cassandra's mother mentioned that Cassandra's phone case had rhinestones, making it easy to spot. The phone was soon found, but Cassandra's body was not. Mary expressed her grief, saying she had looked forward to being a grandmother soon and hadn't even had time to set up a crib for her expected grandchild, which was still in its box in the garage. She wondered what to do with it now, unknowingly providing important information for the investigation. According to statistics, many crimes against pregnant women are committed by their partners. However, Mary Smith did not know who Cassandra's boyfriend was. Cassandra was not married and didn't seem to be in a relationship, yet she was pregnant. Mary had no information about him, despite knowing that Cassandra often spoke to someone on the phone. However, the phone number was not saved in Cassandra's phone book, and Mary couldn't recall the number. It's common for girls to confide in at least one friend about their relationships, especially when it comes to something as significant as pregnancy. The police found such a friend, who revealed that Cassandra had reconnected with her ex-boyfriend, Colin Dudley. They had a brief relationship in February 2004, but it was surprising that they rekindled their romance 15 years after breaking up. When Cassandra discovered she had been pregnant, she had hesitated to inform Colin. She had recalled an earlier conversation where he had expressed his disdain for having children, even expressing relief that his wife Rebecca had been infertile. Fearing a child would disrupt her relationship with Colin, Cassandra had kept her secret hidden. However, as her pregnancy had progressed, it had become more and more difficult to hide underneath the oversized clothes. To avoid arousing suspicion, Cassandra had stopped seeing Colin, even though she had known she couldn't keep the truth hidden forever. Cassandra decided it had been best to be honest with Colin, so she had told him over the phone that she had been pregnant with his child. Colin had been silent for a moment before replying that he had been happy about the news. Although his tone had seemed a bit off, Cassandra had believed he had truly felt happy. A detective visited Colin's house and knocked on the door. However, the person who had opened the door had been Rebecca, a detective who introduced herself as Colin's old friend and had asked to meet Colin. Without hesitation, Colin had stepped out from behind Rebecca, closed the door behind him, and walked out of the house with the detective. It had seemed like Colin had been expecting this conversation, even though the detective had yet to formally introduce himself. Colin told the detective that he appreciated the detectives for not revealing any information in front of Rebecca. Colin mentioned that he had heard about Cassandra's disappearance and found it strange, and said that he didn't know where she had gone. He explained that Cassandra had told him about a big argument with her brother, Robert. Colin had advised Cassandra to reconcile with Robert, but was unsure whether she would take his advice. The detective already knew about the fight between Cassandra and Robert, as Colin had explained to the detective that it had been just a small family misunderstanding, even though Robert had been extremely upset about it. On the day she disappeared, Cassandra had called Colin and said she wanted to talk, but he had refused because of his ego. Now, Colin blamed himself for her disappearance, believing that if he had met her that day, she might not have disappeared. Colin admitted to the detective that he had not been the nicest person, that he had been secretly dating Cassandra behind Rebecca's back for a long time and expressed his belief that he would probably be punished for it in the other world. Colin also shared that when his father had passed away in February 2014, he had a deep hatred for Rebecca. Rebecca often clashed with her father Colin, accusing him of not understanding her. However, sometimes it turned out that it was actually Rebecca who didn't understand her father. After Colin's father had passed away, Colin had wanted to fulfill one of his wishes. His father had been right about some things, and Colin decided to rekindle his relationship with Cassandra. This meant Colin had to end things with Rebecca. Therefore, for 5 years, Colin had lived a double life, which was extremely difficult. Colin constantly made excuses to come home late, telling Rebecca about fake business trips. Colin even bought a fishing rod even though he didn't like fishing. Colin would tell Rebecca that he was going to the lake when in reality he was visiting Cassandra. To make his lie more believable, he bought fish from the supermarket and Rebecca would cook it, despite the fact that the smell of fish made him sick. Things took a surprising turn when Colin discovered that Cassandra was pregnant. Colin did not know who the father was, but Cassandra had confided in a close friend that it was Colin. Colin found this hard to believe. She wanted to have a family of her own with Colin, but this was something Colin could not provide for her. Colin assumed she had found someone else, and he assumed that was why Cassandra didn't want to see him anymore. The detective asked Colin when was the last time he had seen her. Colin honestly replied that he didn't remember, but it was probably about 3 or 4 months ago. Colin said that he had run into Cassandra at the mall, but only briefly because Rebecca was trying on clothes, and he had gotten tired of waiting, so he walked to the coffee shop. Colin asked the police officer one last time if they had any chance of finding Cassandra alive. The detective replied that they were doing everything they could and asked Colin to believe him. This was not the last time Colin saw the detective. Although Cassandra's phone was unusable, police had obtained her call records. It turned out that the person Cassandra had been calling frequently was Colin Dudley. Cassandra had called him often, even on the day she went missing. Police also received CCTV footage from the railway station near where Cassandra's abandoned car was found. The video showed a suspicious man standing out among passengers on the platform. He was wearing a long coat, gloves, and a scarf covering his face. A wide-brimmed hat obscured his eyes, making it impossible for police to see his face clearly. However, the detective noted that the man's gait reminded him of Colin Dudley. The hat was similar to the one Colin had worn at the party playing a character in the movie A Clockwork Orange. After tracking the suspect via CCTV, detectives observed him briefly entering a coffee shop, only to leave a few minutes later and head towards the parking lot. There, he got into his car and drove away. Even though his face was obscured the entire time, detectives were still able to write down the license plate number. A search warrant was then issued and a unit was dispatched to Colin Dudley's residence. During the search of Colin's home, detectives hoped that Cassandra was still alive. At first, there was no evidence of a murder at Colin's house. However, in the wardrobe they find the hat that Colin had tried to hide. They then found a basement in his house. When the police went to the basement, they did not find Cassandra there and there was no evidence of a crime. However, the dog detected the smell of blood, became agitated and barked continuously. Colin insisted he did nothing illegal, claiming that the police had no evidence and no other suspects, so they were trying to frame him, and he claimed to be an innocent man. In search of more information, detectives interviewed Rebecca, who was shocked by the surprise search, the allegations against her husband, and the fact that she had been deceived for years. She said many things about Colin and her feelings, but when the detective asked if her husband was capable of murder, she thought for a long time and then answered no. The evidence against Colin was not enough to send him to prison, which angered Robert and Mary Smith. Later, Colin was called in again for questioning. This time, Colin claimed that he had an alibi to counter the charges against him. He said that at 6:30 a.m. on August 25th, he went to a hardware store and bought household cleaning chemicals and trash bags. The store's cameras confirmed this, but the purchase of large trash bags raised suspicions. In addition, Colin received a text message from Cassandra, saying that Cassandra was coming to his house. Colin immediately deleted the message, but it was still stored in the mobile carrier's memory. The police took it from calls and text messages. According to cell phone signals, Colin and Cassandra had not left the house for several hours that morning. Colin turned off his phone but left Cassandra's phone on, possibly accidentally. As a result, police were able to track his movements, including where he was seen on the station's CCTV cameras. Police suspect Colin may have used the cafe to clean up after the murder and wash up in the toilet. Colin drove to where he had discarded Cassandra's phone, which was the last location of Cassandra's cell phone signal. The police need to find Cassandra's body and seize the GPS tracking device on Colin's car to accurately track his route. This device provided new evidence in the case. Following Colin's trail the previous day, the police discovered a large trash can tied with a rope in a ravine in the forest. The ground around the bag was covered in blood, and it was clear to see what was inside. The case happened a month ago, so identifying the body was difficult. However, police were able to identify Cassandra's body thanks to a tattoo described in the search notes. Colin was arrested the same day and charged with murder. Forensic examination revealed that Cassandra's death was caused by a fractured skull due to blunt force trauma. During the trial, the police presented Colin Dudley's motive for committing the crime. However, due to a lack of witnesses and physical evidence, including the murder weapon, it was impossible to convince the jury that Colin was guilty. To resolve the case, the court offered Colin a plea deal stating that if he pleaded guilty, he would receive a reduced sentence. Colin accepted the deal and was sentenced to 26 years in prison. Cassandra's mother and brother were deeply saddened by the outcome, as they still grappled with feelings of guilt for not having met Cassandra before her death. They are especially worried about the fact that Colin may one day be released from prison, free to live the rest of his life regardless of the crimes he has committed against their family. The case of Kelly Cochran. Christopher Reagan was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, where he spent his early years. At the age of 20, he decided to serve his country and join the military. Christopher committed himself to protecting the peace and safety of his fellow citizens. Christopher was stationed at a military base near Marquette, where he met Terry O'Donnell, a young teacher from Iron River. They lived in the same area and would often see each other around town as they spent more time together. They remained close friends for many years, but Christopher eventually decided to leave the military and move to Traverse City. Despite the distance between them, they continued to communicate regularly, and in December 2012, Christopher asked Terry to take their relationship to the next level. Terry and Christopher have known each other for many years. They find they have a lot in common. They decide to live together. Terry and Christopher choose Iron River as the perfect place for them to settle down. Christopher finds a job at a factory that makes parts for military ships, where he becomes a supervisor. However, after 2 years of living together, problems began to arise in their relationship. Unfortunately, they didn't make an effort to work through their issues, and it became clear that their relationship was coming to an end. Eventually, they made the difficult decision to go their separate ways. Despite the breakup, they were able to part on good terms and remain friends. After breaking up with Terry, Christopher realized that he couldn't live in her house anymore, so he decided to rent his own house. He felt that the town he lived in was too small, and he wanted a more dynamic city. Christopher began applying for jobs in various locations, sending out his resume in search of a new job. In October 2014, Christopher found a job in Asheville, North Carolina. As Christopher settled into his new life in Asheville, he contacted Terry on October 14th, telling her that he would be taking the day off tomorrow and looking forward to meeting Terry for a walk. However, on October 15th, Christopher did not contact Terry as planned. Terry became worried and tried calling him for several days, but he did not answer. She even contacted their mutual friends. 10 days after Christopher went missing, Terry filed a police report. The police accepted the report and told Terry that Christopher had probably moved to a new job in North Carolina and that he had started a new life and wanted to contact old friends. To avoid speculation, investigators conducted a thorough investigation. They identified Christopher's new workplace and contacted an employee to gather information. However, surprisingly, they found out that Christopher had not shown up to work in 10 days. The police then suspected that he might have been involved in an accident, given his frequent solo outdoor trips. The search for Christopher led investigators to the local woods, where he was known to frequent. Trained search dogs were brought in to aid in the effort, but no signs of Christopher were found. Terry, concerned that Christopher may have been injured or in an accident, suggested searching his former apartment. The investigators agreed and visited the apartment, where they were met with a scene of disarray. Clothes and belongings were scattered across the floor, and closets were left open. Initially, they thought that Christopher might have simply been messy, but Terry disputed this, stating that Christopher was typically neat and organized. The detectives started to suspect a connection between the recent events and the crime. After investigating Christopher's home, they decided to expand their search. A thorough search of the neighborhood led them to find Christopher's car 8 miles outside Iron River near the city limits. The police found it unusual that the car was left there, suggesting it might have been abandoned unintentionally. After forcing open a door, they searched the interior and found nothing suspicious, only ordinary clothing. However, one of the officers noticed a small yellow piece of paper on the front passenger seat with a detailed route written on it. They decided to follow the route to see where it led. Although the paper did not specify an exact address, the directions were clear. According to Terry, Christopher, although familiar with the city of Iron River, did not know the local street names, so he wrote down the directions using landmarks such as bus stops and gas stations. Terry deduced from the detailed notes that this was Christopher's first time visiting the location. The detectives followed the route outlined on the paper, which led them to a nearby town and a specific house mentioned in Christopher's notes. When they arrived, they knocked on the door to gather information and Christopher's connection to the location. A man named Jason Cochran answered the door, and his wife Kelly was there. The police explained that they were investigating Christopher's disappearance and had found a lead pointing to this address. Terry, who worked with Christopher at the same factory, revealed that they were co-workers. She had tried to contact Christopher via text message in mid-October but had not received a response. Investigators found a note in Christopher's car that showed the route to Jason's house. Although confused, Jason and Kelly agreed to cooperate with the investigation. After a short interrogation without any further clues, the detectives left Jason Cochran's house. Detectives then interviewed Christopher's co-workers at the factory. A supervisor shared that Christopher had been having an affair with Kelly Cochran, which was an open secret among employees. This revelation sparked interest, leading investigators to re-question the Jason and Kelly. During re-interrogation, Kelly confessed to her relationship with Christopher. However, she claimed that she could not reveal this information earlier because her husband Jason was present. According to Kelly, Jason agreed to her affair. However, Christopher's colleagues disputed Kelly's story. They claimed that Jason did not approve of Kelly's affair. When Jason was later brought in for questioning, he completely denied approving of Kelly's affair. His strong objection to Kelly's infidelity aroused suspicion and made him a suspect. The investigation into Christopher's disappearance was ongoing, but the lack of concrete evidence made it impossible to determine whether Kelly was involved. As a result, Kelly and Jason were released from the police station. The case remained unsolved for 5 months. In March 2015, a new investigator, Detective Jeremy Ogden from the Hobart Police Department, took over the case. Jeremy Ogden began by thoroughly examining the Jason Cochran family's background. Kelly and Jason had met in high school and started living together soon after graduation. They had distinct personalities. Kelly was outgoing, sociable, and talkative, while Jason was quiet and reserved. He rarely initiated conversations, only responding to questions asked of him. Despite their differences, they decided to get married. After the wedding, they started a business together, providing swimming pool maintenance services. The business was modest, but it provided a decent income for they. Jason handled most of the pool maintenance work, but the constant stress and physical strain took a toll on his health. He began to experience back problems and felt increasingly heavier every day. Eventually, he realized he could no longer continue running the business. Kelly then took over the responsibilities of running the business, hoping that Jason would soon recover and return to his duties. However, His condition continued to worsen, and medical treatments were not providing the desired relief. Kelly searched for alternative ways to help her husband recover. During her search, Kelly discovered a plant that offered hope for Jason's recovery. However, the plant was banned in their home state, making it inaccessible to them. To access the treatment, Kelly and Jason decided to relocate to Michigan, specifically Iron River Township, in February 2014. Jason consulted his doctor and received a prescription for pain medication. Around the same time, in early 2014, Jason's wife, Kelly Cochran, started working at a factory that manufactured parts for U.S. warships. Kelly and Jason moved to the area. Kelly and Jason worked at the same factory where Christopher Reagan worked. Christopher and Kelly found common topics of conversation and over time became close friends. This friendship was especially important to Christopher. After gathering evidence, prosecutors presented their case to a Michigan judge to obtain a search warrant for Kelly and Jason's home. The judge granted the warrant, and on March 6th, a team of investigators searched Kelly and Jason's home, carefully searching for any evidence related to Christopher's disappearance. The only significant discovery was a book written by Jason. He used a pseudonym in the world of video games. The title of the work was ordinary, but its content was horrifying. In this dark and violent book, Jason described the murder of the person who had harmed him. After reading the book, the detectives noticed a character who bore an uncanny resemblance to Christopher. This raised suspicions about Jason, leading them to wonder if he had been inspired by the real-life crimes he had committed. 3 weeks later, a second search of Jason's home was conducted. The police hoped to find crucial evidence that had been missed in the first search. However, when they arrived at the Jason's home, they found it empty, with no cars in sight. Repeated attempts to knock on the door went unanswered. It was later discovered that Kelly and Jason had fled the state shortly after the initial search, moving to Indiana. Their sudden departure left investigators concerned. Michigan police, needing a DNA sample, asked Indiana police for help. Indiana police went to Jason's new home, where they had just moved. The investigation into Christopher Reagan's disappearance ran out of clues. Time passed, and on February 22, 2016, Hobart, Indiana, police received a frantic call from Kelly Cochran, who tried to explain that her husband, Jason, was not breathing. When paramedics arrived, Kelly was in a panic. It was clear that Jason was beyond saving. He was sitting in a chair, his face burning like fire, as if he had overheated. The doctors officially confirmed Jason's death. His body was then sent for a thorough forensic examination. Meanwhile, Kelly was handed over to a police patrol and taken to relatives who lived nearby. To piece together what happened, investigators thoroughly searched the Jason's new home. During the search, a police officer found a syringe at the foot of Jason in his wife's bed. Initially, investigators believed Jason's death was due to substance abuse. The medical examiner's report showed that Jason had multiple drugs in his system, but Jason's death was due to strangulation, confirmed by bruises on his neck and face. The focus of the investigation then shifted to Kelly Cochran, who appeared to be connected to both crimes. She was now considered the prime suspect in not only Christopher's disappearance but also her husband's murder. On February 23, 2016, Kelly Cochran was summoned to the police station to answer questions about her husband's death. Under direct questioning and pressure from investigators, Kelly denied any involvement in her husband's death and Christopher's disappearance. She claimed that Jason's death was due to a drug overdose. Months later, investigators still lacked concrete evidence to convict Kelly. During the investigation, Detective Jeremy Ogden met Walter Hammerman, a close friend of Jason's. Kelly informed Walter of Jason's death, who then contacted the police. Walter shared his insights with investigators, saying he did not believe Jason's death was caused by drugs. He claimed that Jason had used herbs to relieve his chronic back pain. In March of the previous year, Jason confided in Walter about his concerns. Jason and Kelly were asked to go to Indiana because the Iron River police suspected them of being involved in Christopher's disappearance. This had a significant impact on Jason, leading to depression. Walter observed a notable change in Jason's behavior, with Kelly increasingly taking control over his life. Jason appeared to be constantly anxious, and he began to avoid social gatherings as soon as Kelly returned from work. As the investigation progressed, this information became a vital link. After the medical examiner determined that Jason had died from strangulation, Detective Ogden devised a plan to pressure Kelly into revealing the truth about Jason's death. Walter, Jason's friend, was used as bait to lure Kelly into a trap. On March 1236, Walter, under police surveillance and equipped with a listening device, called Kelly. He told her that Jason had given him a letter containing important information before his death, with the condition that it be sent to the police if anything happened to him. However, Kelly surprisingly asked Walter to drop the idea, which caught both Walter and the police off guard. Despite this development, the detective still lacked direct evidence to build a case. In the weeks following her initial questioning, Kelly was subjected to multiple interrogations by investigators trying to uncover the truth. Despite their efforts, she continued to deny any wrongdoing. However, on April 26, 2016, it became apparent that Kelly Cochran had evaded the scrutiny of investigators and was on the loose. Detectives joined forces with police officers from Iron River and Hobart to launch a federal manhunt for Kelly Cochran. Walter Hammerman, who had cooperated with the police, was shocked and frightened by the news. He feared that Kelly might never be caught and could potentially harm him again. As the search for Kelly intensified, her phone went off, leading investigators to believe she was deliberately concealing her location. Kelly evaded police and fled to Wingo, Kentucky, over 6 hours away from Hobart. A detective notified the local authorities to exercise extreme caution if they found Kelly. Police in Wingo identified Kelly at her cousin's house on April 28th. Understanding that she posed a potential danger and was prone to attempting to escape, officers rapidly proceeded to the residence, avoiding advance warnings that afternoon and detaining Kelly on site. During the interview, Kelly revealed new details. That Kelly was deeply in love with Jason and wanted to leave the city life behind to start over with him. On October 13, 2015, Jason discovered Kelly's infidelity. Jason made a dark pact. The adulterer was obliged to kill his lover if the affair was exposed. Kelly claimed she had never taken this pact seriously, thinking it was just a joke. However, Jason was resolute and warned Kelly that if she didn't fulfill her end of the bargain, he would take matters into his own hands. Despite her reservations, Kelly reluctantly helped Jason commit a heinous crime. The next evening, October 14, 2015, Christopher arrived at Kelly's house, eager to spend a romantic evening with Christopher while her husband was away. Kelly had planned a fun evening, complete with dinner and intimacy. Kelly and Christopher had dinner together and then went upstairs to the house. Then Jason suddenly appeared. Jason rushed into the bedroom, holding a rifle. Christopher immediately realized that he was in danger. Without hesitation, Jason shot Christopher in the head, killing him. Jason and Kelly then dragged the body down to the basement, where they began to dismember it with a hacksaw. Jason and Kelly cut Christopher's limbs and head off his body and placed the remains in several garbage bags. They then dumped the bags in the woods near Crystal Falls. To avoid suspicion, they drove Christopher's car away from the house. Kelly and Jason thoroughly cleaned the house to remove any evidence of the crime. Kelly was consumed by a deep-seated anger towards her husband, whom she blamed for ruining her chance at happiness with he she truly loved, Christopher. She couldn't forgive her husband for depriving her of the opportunity to be with him, and the pain and loss she felt lingered every day. Kelly's resentment towards her husband eventually turned to hatred, and she knew she could no longer live peacefully with him. An opportunity for revenge presented itself on February 22, 2016, when her husband complained of back pain. Kelly convinced him to let her give her an injection, but she deliberately gave him a dose that killed him. However, the medication didn't work as planned, and her husband was still breathing. Kelly then suffocated him by covering his mouth and nose with her hands. To ensure he was dead, she also squeezed his neck, which explained the bruises found on his body. After confessing to the crime, Kelly cooperated with the police to help them locate Christopher's remains. On May 18, 2016, Detective Jeremy Ogden led a team to a remote area near Crystal Falls to search for Christopher's body. A canine unit picked up the scent and led the team to a small hill, where they found a human skull with bullet holes, indicating a homicide. The team believed they had discovered Christopher's remains. Further examination of the scene yielded additional evidence, including a .22 caliber bullet, a broken firearm. Dental records later confirmed the victim's identity. This breakthrough finally solved the case that had haunted investigators for 2 years. Kelly Cochran was formally charged with the murders of Christopher and Jason Cochran in April 2016. On February 13, 2017, Kelly was brought to court in Michigan to face charges. The prosecutor argued that Kelly was the mastermind behind the crime and that she had planned and executed. The prosecution presented strong evidence, including Kelly's own confession, to support their case. However, Kelly told a different story. She claimed that her husband, Jason, was the one who had planned and committed the crime. According to Kelly, Jason was jealous and had been abusing her. On the day of the crime, Jason allegedly hid in the basement and surprised Kelly and Christopher, then shot Christopher in a fit of rage. Kelly also claimed that Jason had forced her to help him dismember the body by threatening to harm her. Despite Kelly's new version of events, the jury found her guilty of premeditated murder after deliberating for 3 hours. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After being sentenced, Kelly Cochran was sent directly to Crown Point Correctional Facility in Ionia, Michigan, where she is currently serving her sentence. The case of Shele Covlin. Shele Covlin grew up on the west side of Manhattan. Shele's life was marked by a love of learning in academic excellence, earning a degree in wealth management. This degree opened the door to a successful career in Swiss banking. Shele's career flourished, and she became skilled at managing multimillion-dollar portfolios for her clients. However, despite her professional success and financial security, Shele felt unfulfilled. She longed to start a family of her own and become a mother. In an effort to change her circumstances, Shele attended a Jewish singles event in February 1998, where she met a 26-year-old man named Rod Covlin, who also worked in the banking sector. Shele and Rod were a young couple with many similar interests and ambitions. Their relationship developed quickly despite their significant age difference. They spent all their time together and then decided to get married, feeling that everything was just right. Some people thought they were rushing into marriage, but for Shele and Rod, it was perfect. They had 2 beautiful children, a boy and a girl, and their family was complete. However, their happy life was shattered on New Year's Eve 2009 when Shele died in a tragic accident. At first, the police thought it was just a freak accident. On December 30th, 2009, 2 police officers were finishing their night shift at a Manhattan police station. They received an emergency call from Rod Covlin, Shele's husband, who had called in a panic to report that he had found Shele in her bathtub, submerged in blood, and that she was dead. He followed the police's instructions to pull her out of the water and attempt to resuscitate her. However, it soon became clear that his efforts to save her life would not be successful. As Shele's body was cold and motionless, Rod Covlin covered her with a blanket and waited for the police to arrive. Police quickly arrived and investigated the scene. Upon arrival, they assessed the situation and blocked off a downtown Manhattan street. Initially, officers suspected that Shele's death may have been a suicide. Inside the apartment, the police found scattered children's toys. Proceeding to the bathroom, they discovered the Shele wrapped in a blanket by her husband. The bloody water in the tub and the wet floor indicated that Rod Covlin had recently pulled the body from the water. A bleeding wound on the back of Shele's head was visible. Police found a torn hinge on the cabinet in the bathroom where Shele died, suggesting she fell after losing her grip on the doorknob. Experts concluded there was no forced entry after checking around the house. The detective working the case decided to talk to the family members. During the interview, it was discovered that Shele and Rod Covlin's 9-year-old daughter was the first to discover her mother's body. Traumatized and shocked by what she saw, she told the police what had happened. It turned out that the night before, she and her younger brother had slept in their mother's bed. Waking up in the middle of the night and realizing that her mother was not there, She went looking for her and stumbled upon the horrifying scene in the bathroom. She quickly called her father, Rod Covlin, who had recently separated from his mother and was downstairs. He rushed into the bathroom, pulled his wife's body out of the water, and called emergency services. Her account of the events matched Rod Covlin's, supporting the theory that her death was an accident. The police informed Shele's family of the tragic event, leaving everyone in shock. An autopsy and forensic examination were scheduled for the following day. When the medical examiner contacted investigators to begin the examination, he was surprised to learn that this procedure would not take place, despite being necessary. This left the examiner confused. It was later discovered that a rabbi from Shele synagogue had intervened. The rabbi contacted an organization responsible for burying Orthodox Jews, who then asked the police for permission to enter the scene in accordance with the family's religious rites. The police granted permission and a team of rabbis arrived at the scene. They cleaned up the blood in the bathtub and prepared Shele's body for burial, in accordance with the family's beliefs. Unfortunately, this process destroyed all evidence and clues before they could be examined by the police forensic department. Orthodox Jewish tradition considers autopsies unacceptable because they involve defiling the body of the deceased. The rabbi quickly stepped in to support Shele's grieving family, who were grateful for the rabbi's help. As a result, the family agreed to forego an autopsy and organize funeral arrangements. Shele was buried within 24 hours, with hundreds of people attending to pay their respects. Shele's parents questioned the cause of Shele's death. Police told them that potential evidence had been destroyed during the cleanup. They thought that a fall in the bathtub would certainly have caused the accident, but the possibility of death from such an accident seemed unlikely. The family hired a private investigator to investigate the circumstances of her death and determine whether it was indeed an accident. The private investigator begins by going to the family home to talk to Shele's relatives and learns that Shele's marriage to Rod Covlin is having major problems. Their marriage began to fall apart after their 10th wedding anniversary in February 2008. Rod Covlin frequently changed jobs and developed a gambling addiction, spending a lot of money on gambling. Shele felt neglected because Rod Covlin spent a lot of time playing video games. Shele was also frustrated by the amount of money Rod Covlin's family spent on his frequent trips, and he was unfaithful to her. Shele, after discovering his email cheating, she decided to end their marriage and began the process of getting a religious divorce. However, the formal divorce process will take some time to complete. Although they are separated and experiencing strain in their relationship, they has tried to maintain their relationship for the sake of their children. Despite this effort, conflicts and disagreements between Shele and Rod Covlin continued to arise. Shele had recently confided in her loved ones about her grievances with Rod Covlin, characterizing him as aggressive and hot-tempered. She felt uneasy and monitored. The private detective suspected that Rod Covlin might have been involved in his wife Shele's death due to the complexities in their marital life. To investigate further, the detective aimed to determine if a crime had occurred at the scene where Shele's body was found. He planned to inspect her apartment, but the door was sealed, requiring him to obtain a court order to gain access. Upon arriving at the scene with New York police officers, the detective attempted to unlock the door with a provided key, but it wouldn't budge. Just then, Rod Covlin appeared from his apartment, claiming he had heard a noise and came to investigate. When questioned by the police and the detective, Rod Covlin took the key and easily opened the door. This raised suspicions. Had Rod Covlin genuinely heard a noise, or was he deliberately keeping an eye on the situation? The detective searched the apartment for evidence of murder. Shele's family said she was home on December 31st, but her phone was missing. A phone charger was found, but not the phone that he paid particular attention to the hinges, which investigators believed she had ripped off during a fall. The more he examined them, the more he suspected that, with Shele's strength, ripping off hinges that were firmly attached to the cabinet was impossible. The detective discussed his findings with the police, trying to convince them that Shele's death was not an accident, but a murder. However, the police remained unconvinced, citing a lack of evidence. Therefore, they decided to perform an autopsy to conclusively determine the cause of death. This decision caused a difficult debate with Shele's family. The exhumation took place 2 weeks after Shele had been buried. Her loved ones were deeply distressed by the decision. In the Jewish faith, exhumation is considered negative and many religious leaders oppose the practice. The family needed time to think about their next steps. They felt the need to find out the truth about their daughter's death, so they agreed to exhume her body. However, the exhumation process was difficult, so the family had to apply for a special order from the prosecutor's office. Even with the family's consent, they still had to make sure that all the necessary paperwork was completed. Once all the paperwork was completed, they proceeded with the exhumation and autopsy. The autopsy results showed that Shele did not die from a fall, but from strangulation, which caused her to suffocate and break her neck. The official cause of Shele's death was revised, and it was no longer considered an accident. Instead, it was officially ruled a murder. The detectives' suspicions and efforts were vindicated. The autopsy results were instrumental in prompting the New York Police Department to reopen the investigation into Shele's death. Detectives began scrutinizing new evidence, including phone records and bank statements. They also interviewed everyone who had interacted with Rod Covlin and Shele. The attorneys shared information about Rod Covlin and Shele during the first divorce hearing in May 2009. Rod Covlin claimed that he could not afford the money because he was unemployed, but the judge said that he had to give up gambling and electronics. In court, Rod Covlin's true nature was exposed, and he continued to criticize Shele, making false accusations about her lifestyle, finances, and behavior toward their son. He even called Shele's workplace to defame her. In the subsequent divorce hearing on July 7, 2009, the court banned Rod Covlin from spending time alone with the children, a ban that remained in place even after Shele's death. The court also denied Rod Covlin custody of the children and awarded custody to Rod Covlin's parents through a social worker. This decision likely angered Rod Covlin greatly. Police interviewed a former caregiver who had cared for Rod Covlin's children before he fired her. It was discovered that on December 30th, Shele had received an expensive keratin hair treatment that cost hundreds of dollars. The care instructions emphasized avoiding humidity in high temperatures for several days, essentially prohibiting baths or showers. Shele's autopsy revealed no signs of bathing on the day of her death, leading investigators to speculate that she may not have taken a bath. Detectives reviewed surveillance footage from the building, which showed Rod Covlin leaving his apartment at 4 a.m. on the day of the murder, dressed to go out. He returned a short time later. The building security guard found this unusual, as Rod had never left the building that early. The security guard asked Rod Covlin if he needed anything, but when he said no, Rod Covlin returned with the chocolate bars and gave them to the security guard. Investigators believe that Rod Covlin's actions were intentional to create an alibi, and as a result, he became the prime suspect. Shele and Rod Covlin were still married, which meant that absent a will or divorce, Rod Covlin would inherit her estate, which was worth over $5 million additionally. On December 31, 2009, Shele scheduled a meeting with her attorney to update her will and remove Rod Covlin from the list of beneficiaries, which posed a significant threat to Rod Covlin's rights and provided a clear motive for the crime. All of Shele's assets were frozen in a safe deposit account. It is likely that Rod Covlin knew about Shele's plans to remove his name from her will, as he may have been monitoring her activities. A review of the surveillance footage revealed that Shele had returned home at 8 p.m. the night before the crime, talking on her phone. However, the phone had gone missing after the crime. The investigators decided to conduct another search of the crime scene, and upon returning to the apartment, they quickly found Shele's mobile phone lying on her bedside table, still connected to the charger. When questioned by the police, Rod Covlin hired a lawyer, Ed, who advised him to remain silent. As a result, investigators had to continue searching for new evidence implicating Rod Covlin. When they examined Rod Covlin's phone records, they discovered frequent calls to the number of Deborah Holmes, a married woman with 3 children, 5 months before Shele's murder. Rod Covlin and Deborah met at a sick bow tournament and began a passionate affair. They often met at sick bow tournaments or played together online. Investigators saw an opportunity to gather information and decided to contact Deborah with a few questions. However, to their surprise, Deborah responded that her attorney had asked her not to cooperate. Faced with Deborah's refusal to speak, the police asked for the name of her attorney. The response revealed that Deborah and Rod Covlin were the same attorney. As a last resort, the police searched Shele's newly discovered phone for incriminating text messages or electronic communications between Rod and Deborah. All data had been completely erased by a professional. Even skilled programmers were unable to recover the deleted messages. Over time, it became clear that he had succeeded in evading justice. While his crimes may have been well executed, the rabbi's meticulous cleaning of the bathroom was a major factor in hampering the investigation. By removing all traces of blood and other evidence, they destroyed DNA, making it increasingly difficult for investigators to collect evidence. The case stalled because Rod Covlin confessed to the crime and a lack of evidence prevented the case from going to trial. 5 years have passed since the investigation into Shele's death began, but no arrests have been made. Police have searched for clues and evidence of Rod Covlin's involvement in Shele's death for years, but to no avail. However, the case took a turn when Rod Covlin's mistress, Deborah, came forward. She contacted the police, and they invited her to the station for questioning. Deborah had recently broken up with Rod Covlin, which prompted her to contact the police. She shared information with the police that Rod Covlin had conspired to gain custody of the children, but because he was a suspect in Shele's death and did not have custody of the children, he could not access the money Shele left behind. Rod Covlin hatched a sinister plan to get his hands on Shele's fortune. Rod Covlin planned to manipulate his 15-year-old daughter into falsely accusing her grandfather, Rod Covlin's father, of assaulting her. This would result in the grandfather being imprisoned and losing custody of his granddaughter, and Rod Covlin would give his daughter a large sum of money upon completion of the mission. Meanwhile, Rod Covlin had been secretly withdrawing funds from the only account he had access to, which was meant for his children's education. His parents discovered that he was misusing the money and were extremely unhappy with his lack of concern for his children's well-being. This led to a heated dispute between Rod Covlin and his parents. Rod Covlin's anger towards his parents escalated to the point where he considered harming them. In 2012, he confided in his lover, Deborah, about his plan to have his daughter poison his parents' tea with rat poison. He believed that since his daughter was a minor, she would receive a lighter sentence if caught. Following this, Rod Covlin came up with several other schemes. He considered burning down his parents' house and trapping them inside by jamming the doors. Rod Covlin also thought about arranging a fake marriage for his daughter to a Mexican man, which would have forced her to give up part of her inheritance to him. The police were shocked by the details of Rod Covlin's plans. Deborah secretly collected evidence, storing a large amount of data on hard drives. Deborah realized she was dealing with a psychopath, and she waited until after she broke up with Rod Covlin to share the evidence with the police. The recordings she collected of Rod Covlin's conversations with various people. The police now had to listen carefully to these recordings to find conclusive evidence. Deborah's contribution to the investigation was crucial. As the investigators analyzed the recordings, they made a surprising discovery. In a conversation with a friend he met through backgammon, Rod Covlin casually mentioned that he had keys to Shele's apartment and could enter it at any time. Investigators found that Rod Covlin was plotting against his own daughter, planning to pin the responsibility for the Shele's demise on her. Thanks to all the information gathered, the police finally had compelling evidence to charge Rod Covlin with the demise of his wife. On November 1, 2015, Rod Covlin was arrested. Shele's family awaited the trial of their daughter's perpetrator, but victory was not assured. Rod Covlin, while incarcerated, shared intimate details of his wife's murder with a fellow inmate. He even reenacted the strangulation, which matched the autopsy results. During the 7-week trial, the jury heard testimony about the heinous crimes he planned to commit, including murdering his wife, targeting his parents, and framing his own children. The jury was horrified by his cold-blooded nature. In March 2019, the court convicted Rod Covlin of murdering his wife, Shele. Although there was no direct eyewitness, the overwhelming evidence led to a life imprisonment sentence. With the possibility of parole after 25 years, Rod Covlin will no longer pose a threat to his family or the people of New York. The case of Austin Harroun. Austin Malcolm Harroun, known by the nickname Golden Boy, was born on December 21, 1996, in Palm Beach, Florida. He was the eldest of 2 children and was born into a wealthy and respected medical family. His father was a successful dentist with many private clinics, and his mother was a leading pharmaceutical expert. The Harroun family lived in a spacious, luxurious house by the sea. When Austin was 1.5 years old, his younger sister Haley was born, and the 2 siblings quickly became close. Austin's parents ensured that he and his younger sister received a good education and encouraged personal growth and creative pursuits. Austin excelled at school and had many interests outside of studying. He was passionate about playing guitar, wrestling, football, and acting in an amateur theater group. He saw himself as a creative and ambitious person. Along with his parents and sister, Austin traveled extensively, discovering new places during their vacations. Austin described himself as a cheerful and optimistic person with a strong imagination who excelled in academics and sports through perseverance. However, Austin also admitted that he was very shy, which sometimes made it difficult for him to communicate with his peers. Austin's personal life was interrupted at the age of 13 when his parents decided to divorce. His father moved out of the family home and into a new home with his new partner, eventually marrying her. Meanwhile, Austin remained with his mother, who also found a new partner and married him within a year. Despite facing the emotional challenges of his parents' divorce, Austin continued to excel academically and athletically. Austin always dreamed of becoming a doctor to help others. He was a high-achieving student and was admired by many of his friends. Austin's physical transformation during his youth was remarkable. He grew to be 6 feet 2 inches tall, developed outstanding muscles, and became strong. Austin's charismatic smile and gentle demeanor gave him an almost angelic appearance. However, he still struggled with social anxiety and shyness, which limited his ability to form relationships. In his personal diary, Austin wrote candidly about feeling isolated at school. His classmates called him a nerd and made fun of him, leaving Austin with few friends. Despite these difficulties, he still held out hope that his life would improve once he entered college. Austin looked forward to starting over, forging new relationships, and gaining independence from his parents. The important turning point came when Austin received news that he had been accepted into the University of Florida's prestigious 4-year medical program. This achievement promised to open the door to a successful and rewarding medical career with the opportunity to continue his studies at any of the top medical schools in the country. Overjoyed by this news, Austin felt like his dream was finally within reach. As he prepared to enter this new chapter, his parents drove him to the college campus in late August. With excitement mixed with trepidation, Austin began his journey to becoming an independent adult, documenting his experiences in his first vlog. During his freshman year, Austin became deeply interested in bodybuilding and spent a significant amount of time in the gym, achieving notable results. He had developed strong muscles, but his success was partly due to steroid use. Austin had openly discussed steroid use in a YouTube vlog he had started in February. Austin had posted various videos to his channel, including discussions about sports and fitness, musical performances with his guitar, and philosophical musings on life. However, over time, his posts became increasingly disturbing. Austin began warning his followers about the dangers of steroids, claiming that they could cause serious mental health consequences and drive a person crazy. Austin had 2 distinct physical states, a normal state and a state he called crazy. Austin found it difficult to understand these contrasting aspects of himself. Austin had created videos where he spoke in different voices, as if he were other people. Sometimes, Austin's voice changed and he burst into tears for no apparent reason. Experts then reviewed Austin's posts and concluded that Austin was desperately seeking help in each post. As Austin struggled to connect with others during his studies, his blog had become his primary means of expressing himself. Over time, videos recorded him gradually becoming insane. His behavior became increasingly erratic, provocative, and aggressive. Some subscribers suspected he was using banned substances while recording, and they asked him about it in the comments section. Austin denied this, saying it was unhealthy and that he would never use banned substances. However, his behavior showed otherwise. One subscriber even speculated that Austin might have dissociative identity disorder. The sudden changes in Austin were not only manifested in behavior but also in appearance. When he returned home for summer vacation, his mother and sister were shocked by the changes they witnessed. During his year-long separation, Austin had experienced significant physical changes, including significant muscle gain, but these changes were more than superficial. Austin's behavior became increasingly strange. He would say nonsense and claim he didn't need sleep. At first, his family did not take this seriously, but as night fell, they realized he was serious. Austin declared that he would guard the house and protect his family from unknown threats, and he kept his promise, wandering the hallways until morning. Every hour, he loudly checked on his mother and sister, reassuring them that they could sleep peacefully because he was guarding them. The next morning, his mother made him talk seriously and asked him if he had used drugs. Austin admitted that he had tried many different stimulants over the past year and described their effects on him. He even used a powerful synthetic drug that caused hallucinations, rage, and could be fatal if overdosed. However, he promised his mother that he had stopped using and was no longer in danger. Despite her concerns, Austin's mother did not seek help from professionals. As a pharmacist, she thought she could help her son herself. She gave him sedatives and sleeping pills to help him relax and sleep after a long, restless night. However, Austin only slept for a few hours before resuming his vigil, informing his family every hour that everything was quiet and under control. Over several weeks, Austin's behavior continued to deteriorate, but his mother refused to seek professional help from psychiatrists and did not even inform his father about the situation. On the morning of August 13th, Austin unexpectedly visited an old classmate who lived nearby. The classmate was stunned because they hadn't seen each other in over a year and Austin hadn't contacted her. When she asked why he came, Austin explained that he had forgotten the year of his birth and was looking for answers. The confused classmate replied that it was 1996, after which Austin abruptly turned around and left without saying anything. Austin's behavior scared and puzzled the girl, so she immediately called Austin's mother and told her everything, asking if the boy might be using drugs. This prompted the woman to call her ex-husband, who was working in another state, and express her concern that something was seriously wrong with their son. Austin's father flew to Florida the next day and, after speaking with his son, suggested he voluntarily check into a clinic for a medical examination, which Austin firmly refused. Austin's father then had a heartfelt conversation with his ex-wife, and together they decided to send Austin for a mandatory examination and subsequent treatment at a drug rehabilitation or psychiatric facility. However, they couldn't do it in time. A troubling revelation followed. The next day, Austin's friends invited him to join them at the beach because of the hot and sunny weather. His mother insisted that Haley accompany him to keep an eye on her brother. Austin was excited about the outing but dressed as if he were going to the mountains instead of the beach. He wore a thick athletic hoodie, long pants, boots, and ski goggles. When his friends saw him, they were silent at first, then burst into laughter. They teased him about his outfit and asked if he was okay. Austin became angry and shouted that if they thought he was crazy, he would prove it by threatening their lives. Austin's friend didn't take him seriously but stepped back just in case. Haley noticed Austin was on the edge of a breakdown and decided to talk to him to calm him down. In a private conversation, Austin confided to Harley that he believed he was half wild animal, immortal, and had superhuman strength. This frightened her, but she stayed calm to avoid provoking him. At the beach, Austin behaved normally. He joked, laughed, played volleyball, and had fun with his friends. As evening came, they all said goodbye and went their separate ways. Austin and Haley walked to a small restaurant near the coast to meet their father and his current wife. On the way, Austin told Haley he wanted to test his immortality by crossing a busy highway directly through the fast-moving traffic. When Haley realized what was happening, she chased after Austin and physically pulled him away, urging him to hurry because they were expected. Austin agreed that they shouldn't keep anyone waiting and quietly followed his sister. During dinner, Austin acted strangely again, getting up from the table several times to go outside, looking around as if he was afraid of someone, then returning. He then decided to tell his father and stepmother about his belief in his immortality. When his father calmly suggested seeking professional help, Austin leaped up, shouted that he wasn't insane, pushed his father forcefully, and ran out of the restaurant. After leaving the restaurant, Austin walked several miles and eventually wandered into a neighborhood he didn't recognize. There, an open garage with bright lights caught his attention, and he headed towards it. This home belonged to an elderly couple, 59-year-old John Stevens and 56-year-old Michelle Michigan Stevens. In the evenings, they loved barbecuing and watching movies in their spacious garage, which they had set up like a living room. Married for over 25 years, they had 3 adult children who lived independently, allowing them to enjoy retirement and each other's company. That evening, John took their dog for a walk while Michelle prepared for their usual movie night. When Michelle noticed an unfamiliar young man on their lawn, she felt no threat and even asked if he needed help. However, the situation unexpectedly took a turn. Jeffrey Pfizer, the Stevens family neighbor who lived across the street, was on friendly terms with them. Around 9 p.m., he heard suspicious noises outside. When he looked into the yard, he suddenly heard Michelle's agonizing scream. Without hesitation, he rushed to help his neighbors and saw Austin near the garage. Jeffrey tried to pull Austin away, but Austin was overpoweringly strong and knocked Jeffrey to the ground. As Jeffrey tried to recover, Austin stabbed him several times in the back and shoulder. Realizing he was overpowered and needed help, Jeffrey ran into the Stevens family house to draw Austin's attention away from himself. After exiting through the back door, Jeffrey headed to his own home. Once inside, Jeffrey realized Austin had not followed him but had returned to attack Michelle. Jeffrey immediately called the police and emergency medical services, reporting an armed attack by a stranger with a knife and stating that both he and his elderly neighbor had been injured. After contacting emergency services, Jeffrey fell silent, listening closely. He eventually realized no one was outside his door. It seemed Austin had remained at Stephen family's house, and now strange animal-like noises, resembling the growls of a wild beast, could be heard along with screams of terror and moans. It took the police about 10 minutes to arrive, but by then it was tragically too late. The sight that awaited them was horrifying. 2 officers approached the garage with weapons drawn, only to be halted in shock at the doorway. There, in a pool of blood, lay the lifeless body of Michelle Stevens. The autopsy later revealed she had suffered multiple blunt force traumas to the head and a stab wound to the chest. A bit further inside, in the dim light, 2 more individuals were on the ground. John was reaching out, pleading for help with a strained voice. Above him, Austin was seemingly choking him. The officers demanded that Austin release the victim, threatening him with their guns. However, Austin showed no response, and firing was too risky due to the possibility of hitting both people. Instead, one officer drew a taser and warned Austin. Only then did he see that Austin was not just assaulting but actually biting John's face, holding his head and neck firmly. Beneath John spread a vast pool of blood, with a chunk of flesh missing from his left cheek. And his lip, nose, and ear were also mutilated and seemingly chewed off. John was immobilized, barely able to move, silently pleading for help. The officers shocked the attacker with the taser, but he seemed unaffected, continuing to tear at John's face with his teeth. A kick to Austin's face only made him growl loudly and bite into Stevens's cheek again. Reinforcements arrived, including a police dog that was unleashed on the frenzied young man. The dog latched onto Austin's arm, but he seemed to feel no pain, breaking free and injuring himself further. A powerful kick from an officer finally disoriented Austin long enough to handcuff him. At this moment, Austin claimed he felt unwell, possibly having eaten something bad, before losing consciousness and convulsing. Emergency medical teams transported 4 individuals from the scene. Unfortunately, Michelle could not survive, and her husband John passed away on the way to the hospital due to severe blood loss from stab wounds and the trauma from the attack. Jeffrey, who reported the incident, survived, but he experienced permanent minor motor skill impairment in his right hand due to nerve and tendon damage. Austin fell into a coma after mistakenly ingesting a substance from a garage bottle, thinking it was alcohol, which turned out to be a chemical. He suffered severe burns to his esophagus and stomach and spent several days in critical condition, but medical professionals ultimately saved him. Austin, the attacker, spent nearly 2 weeks in a coma. Upon regaining consciousness, he claimed to remember nothing about the events of that day. Gradually, he began to recall having dinner at a restaurant and an argument with his father, after which he walked away. Austin described seeing a ghostly figure that guided him through dark alleys and unfamiliar neighborhoods until he saw a light in the distance. The light came from a lantern near Stephen family's garage, where John was preparing a barbecue and setting out food. When Michelle saw him, she was startled and called for help. Austin admitted to hitting her several times and then pulled out a knife, claiming he would rid her of evil. At that moment, a neighbor named Jeffrey Fisher intervened, but Austin, thinking Jeffrey was a demon, attacked him with the knife. After Jeffrey ran to get help, Austin continued to assault the woman until she was lifeless. He then noticed a bottle, mistook it for alcohol, and drank about half of it. Soon after, he heard a dog barking and a man's voice. Austin claimed he couldn't remember what happened next, according to his own statements. Initially, there was speculation that Austin was under the influence of strong drugs, which could explain his aggression and lack of sensitivity to pain. However, hospital tests showed no traces of drugs, medication, or alcohol in his blood. This led to the conclusion that Austin might have experienced a psychotic break, acting without awareness of his actions. Experienced psychiatrists were tasked with determining the truth of this claim. The case of Austin Harroun attracted significant media attention due to its extreme brutality and ambiguity, both in the courtroom and psychiatric care. The children of the murdered couple, along with the relatives of the injured neighbor, believed that the young man was pretending to be insane and claiming memory loss to be declared incompetent and avoid harsh punishment. Most people following the case shared this belief. The state-appointed psychological and psychiatric expert, Dr. Landrum, reported that Austin's mental illness led to an acute psychotic episode, resulting in the deaths of Michelle and John. However, the prosecutor argued in court that he did not believe the defendant met the legal definition of insanity at the time of the crime. It was suggested that Austin's mental health had worsened due to experimenting with various drugs, using steroids, and having trouble socializing with peers since school. However, at the time of the crime, he was not under the influence of any illegal substances or alcohol, as none were found in his blood, indicating that the reasons for his violent behavior were another reason. During a court hearing, Austin's father disclosed that their family has a history of schizophrenia, and he worried that his son might have inherited this serious illness. Additionally, Austin was suspected of having clinical lycanthropy delusion, a rare disorder. This might explain why he acted like a wild animal and seemed immune to pain, although no psychiatrist confirmed this diagnosis. After receiving treatment, Austin was moved to jail, but the case remains unresolved. He is still awaiting trial, and his lawyers argue that he is mentally ill. Meanwhile, the relatives of John and Michelle and Jeffrey have expressed hopes in interviews that Austin will be deemed competent and sentenced to death for his terrible actions. The case of Jolly Joseph. This whole story is about a family in Kerala. The entire family lived in the Kottayam village in the Kottayam district of Kerala. This family was considered one of the wealthiest in the village. The head of the family was named Tom Thomas, and his wife's name was Annama Thomas. They had 2 sons, Roho Thomas and Roy Thomas. In 1997, the elder son Roy Thomas had a grand wedding with a girl named Shele Joseph. After the wedding, Jolie quickly became the family's favorite, managing their affairs efficiently. Despite her kind nature, Jolie was also a devout woman who attended daily prayers. Jolie married Roy Thomas when he was unemployed and depended on his father for expenses. However, after marriage, Jolie continued her studies and later informed the family that she had obtained a job at the National Institute of Technology in Calicut. If occasional minor disagreements are overlooked, the family was very happy, and everyone's lifestyle was going well. However, in February 2002, Annama Thomas suddenly fell ill, leading to her immediate admission to the hospital. After a few days of treatment, her health improved, and she is sent home. Just 2 months after returning home on August 22, 2002, once again, Anama Thomas falls ill. This time, she passes away before being taken to the hospital. Based on symptoms, it is said that her death occurred due to a heart attack. To understand the actual cause of death, the doctor recommends a postmortem, but the family refuses, considering this death as a natural one. In this way, without any postmortem, the final rites of Anama Thomas are performed. The sudden departure of a crucial member of the household deeply shocks everyone, causing considerable distress for a long time. However, as time passes, everyone's life gradually returns to normal. After her mother-in-law died, Jolly became the female head of the family. Jolly is intelligent, extroverted, very good at handling work, and has extensive relationships both inside and outside the family, loved by everyone. After taking financial control, Jolly bought himself a new car, drove every morning pretending to go to work, and returned home at night. During this time, Jolly's husband, Roy, began to drink alcohol and did nothing. Once again, the eldest member of the family was Tom Thomas. The date was August 26, 2008, just a few days after the 6th death anniversary of Anama Thomas. Other relatives were also present at the home. Suddenly, another death occurs in the family. This time, it's the head of the family, Tom Thomas, who passes away unexpectedly. Initial investigations also attribute his death to a heart attack. The family does not opt for a post-mortem for Tom Thomas, and he is laid to rest in a similar manner. Within a span of 6 years, 2 deaths in the family bring significant changes. Where it used to be a joint family, property division now takes place among the remaining members, and almost everyone begins to live as a nuclear family. The 2 previous deaths were not even forgotten when the family faces the death of a 3rd member on September 9, 2011, Jolly's husband, Roy Thomas. Roy Thomas's body was found in the bathroom. Since there had been 2 sudden deaths in this family before, when the 3rd member of the household also dies unexpectedly, some family members suspect foul play rather than considering it a mere coincidence. The decision is made to conduct a post-mortem on Roy Thomas. During the post-mortem, traces of cyanide poison are discovered in Roy Thomas's body. Further investigation reveals that Roy Thomas was facing financial difficulties in those days. According to Roy Thomas's wife, it was the financial problems that led her husband to commit suicide. The initial police inquiry also highlights Roy Thomas's financial problems, and with the conclusion that he took his own life, the case is closed. The case had been closed, but the series of deaths in the family continued. The next death in the family was scheduled for February 24, 2014. This time, the deceased was Matthew Mangioli, the brother of Anama Thomas. Matthew Mangioli's death also occurred suddenly, and despite no post-mortem being conducted, it was considered a mere coincidence. The family was experiencing consecutive deaths, but no one could understand how these deaths were occurring. Initial police investigations revealed no suspicions, and speculation arose that some malevolent force had taken hold of the family, causing mysterious deaths one after another. Some even began to discuss the possibility of a curse afflicting the family. Shortly after the 4th person in the family passed away, another death happened. This time, Alphine Sicarius, the niece of Roy Thomas and daughter of Shazoo Thomas, died. Alphine was just 2 years old when she passed, and her death was sudden. 2 years after that incident, on January 11, 2016, Alphine's mother, Shazoo Thomas's wife, Kelly Cochran, also dies under suspicious circumstances. The mysterious deaths of 6 family members have happened in a puzzling way over the past 14 years, with one death following another. Not only that, shortly after Sully's death, 2 distant relatives of this family also died in a road accident. Jolly, who became a widow, then married Shazoo Thomas, who is the cousin brother of Roy Thomas, and they started living together in 2016. However, one family member did not believe that the deaths in the family were due to a curse or evil spirit. This family member was Rojo Thomas, the son of Anama Thomas and the brother of Roy Thomas. Rojo Thomas was working in America at the time, and after the 6th family member passed away, he started to think that it was not just a coincidence, but a deliberate plan. Rojo Thomas then goes to the local police station, files a case, and appeals to the police to thoroughly investigate the depths of all the motives in the family deaths. Rojo Thomas initiates his own investigation at his level. The people alive in the family were Shazzu Thomas and Jolly Joseph, who were now left among the surviving family members. The police initially did not take the investigation seriously, but Rojo Thomas's own investigation revealed a shocking truth before the police. Jolly had claimed a few years ago that she was working as a commerce lecturer at NIT Calicut. However, upon investigation, Rojo discovered that there was no teacher named Jolie at NIT Calicut. Jolie not only showed her job identity card to support her claims at NIT Calicut, but also shared it with her family. Upon examination, the university administration confirmed that the identity card was fake. Furthermore, the investigation conducted by Rojo Thomas indicates that Jolly Joseph was present during all the deaths or sudden illnesses that have taken place. The fact that Jolly was around for all 6 deaths was not a mere coincidence, but instead suggested a major conspiracy. As a result, the police's suspicion is now focused on Jolly. The deaths previously considered as natural are now under investigation again. Rojo Thomas filed a written complaint against Jolly connected to Roy Thomas's death at the police station. Suspicions are also raised against Jolly in 5 other mysterious deaths. The police have registered the case and intensified their investigation, starting with exhuming the bodies of all 6 family members buried in the cemeteries near St. Lord Church in Kidai Canal and St. Mary's Church in Kuno over the past 14 years. These bodies are sent for forensic examination. Recognizing the seriousness of the case, Kerala police calls upon forensic scientists from various countries to help with the investigation. Meanwhile, the police question Jolly Joseph, who at first denies any role in the deaths of these 6 people. However, as the police intensify their interrogation and expand their list of inquiries, Jolie becomes ensnared and eventually reveals the shocking truth. Jolie admits to poisoning her family members for the past 14 years. When the police investigated the motives behind these murders, an even more startling revelation unfolded. According to Jolie's disclosures during the police interrogation, each murder had its own specific motive. Jolie first tried to kill her mother-in-law, Anima Thomas, in February 2002, but failed. Later, she secretly added poison to Anima's mutton soup when everyone was busy. Anima soon died from the poisoning. Jolie was unhappy because Anima was in charge of the family's finances, so she decided to get rid of her. Jolie's second victim was her father-in-law, Tom Thomas. The reason behind this was that around February 2008, Jolly's husband, Roy Thomas, was facing financial problems. When Jolly sought help from her father, Tom sold 2 acres of land, giving the entire amount to Jolly and Roy. Along with this, he declared that neither of them would have any share in the remaining family property. Jolly then forged property documents, giving Roy Thomas and herself a share in the remaining wealth. Later, Jolly secretly poisoned Tom Thomas's food, leading to his death. Suspicions were raised by Roy Thomas, but he lacked support from other family members. Subsequently, Jolly orchestrated her husband's demise. According to the revelations, Roy Thomas was also facing financial difficulties and had become addicted to alcohol, which led to conflicts between Roy and Jolly. Seizing an opportunity, Jolly poisoned her husband's food, resulting in his death. After the death of Roy Thomas, Matthew, the brother of Anima Thomas and Roy's uncle, was the person who contested Roy's death as not a natural one, insisting on a post-mortem. Despite the confirmation of traces of poison found in the body during the post-mortem, Jolly cleverly convinced the police that Roy had committed suicide willingly, as per Matthew's insistence on the post-mortem. Consequently, suspicion fell on Jolly, and in February 2014, she secretly poisoned Matthew's drink, leading to his death. Jolly's next target is 2-year-old Alina. After killing her husband, Jolie becomes attracted to her deceased husband's cousin, Shazzu Thomas. The issue is that Shazzu Thomas is already married with a daughter. With evil intentions, Jolie murders Shazzu's 2-year-old daughter, Alina, in 2014 before marrying Shazzu Thomas. Later in 2016, Shazzu's wife, Celie, also dies. Following this revelation, the police suspect that Shaju Thomas might also be involved in Jolie's plan. Consequently, Shaju is taken into custody for questioning. However, no evidence against Shaju surfaces. When Jolie is asked about her claim of going to study at NIT Calicut for the past 14 years, it is revealed that she never actually went there as per the college records. Jolie then discloses that she used to leave home on time every day, but most of the time, she spent in a nearby church assisting with its activities. Additionally, sometimes, she would spend time in the canteen on the NIT campus. A surprising revelation in this entire investigation is that everyone with whom Jolie had any connection had a good relationship with her. Talking and laughing with everyone was Jolie's habit, and no one had ever heard her raising her voice at someone. Even the neighbors never tired of praising Jolie. After the revelation in the Jolie case, finally, on October 5, 2019, 47-year-old Jolie Joseph is arrested, accused of murdering 6 family members, including her father-in-law and husband. Many find it hard to believe that a woman known to be family-oriented, well-respected, and kind could be a cold-blooded killer. The investigation discloses that Jolie was provided poison by a person named Matthew, who happened to be Jolie's relative. Matthew's friend, Prachi Kumar, employed at a jewelry shop, facilitated the procurement of cyanide commonly used for cleaning gold and silver ornaments. Cyanide samples are found in Jolie's car and bag during the police search. The evidence, which includes Jolie's confession and scientific findings, led to a 1,800-page charge sheet filed by the police on January 1, 2020. Jolie is facing charges for 6 murders. Even though Jolie was granted bail by the Kerala High Court in 2021, the Kerala government contested the decision in the Supreme Court. At present, Jolie is still in jail, and the case remains a legal dispute. Following the hearing, the Supreme Court denied Jolie's bail, leading to Jolie's continued detention. Just a few months after these revelations, Jolie's second husband, Sharju, also filed for divorce in court. While the investigation into this case is ongoing, some new revelations related to the case emerged in February 2023. The Kerala police had sent the bodies to the CFSL laboratory in Hyderabad after exhuming them from their graves. The report stated that no trace of cyanide was found in 4 out of the 6 bodies recovered, and the examination of the remaining 2 bodies is still underway. Despite the claim, the Kerala police stated that due to the many years since the murders, it is challenging to find traces of cyanide after exhumation. According to the police, even if no traces of cyanide are found in the investigation, Jolie's confession and circumstantial evidence are so strong that her guilt will be proven in court, and she will be given a severe punishment. It has been reported that the police are the ones responsible for what happened in this case. Had the mother-in-law, who was the first victim, received a more extensive investigation, further casualties could have been prevented. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.